Hey, music lovers and tea spillers. Hope you're doing great on this Vijayadasami day. We're so happy that you guys have been showing your support for these past couple of weeks, and we are just so happy that you guys are actually taking the time to listen to this. And if you haven't watched our past videos, please go do that. Just watch it. Just have a good time. Take some time to get to know the people that are actually in Minnesota, and enjoy your day.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching the videos. We have some big stuff coming up. Like this episode, we have a live stream on Halloween. Please tune in. We'll get you the timings on our social links later, or they'll be down in the description, something like that. And today, for our Spill the Surti guest, if you didn't watch the Cup of Copy guest, if you didn't watch the Cup of Copy, go watch Cup of Copy, then you'll understand this joke. So today we have the daughter of the person on on the person of Cup of Copy for the Spill the Surti. Guess who in the comments? Namaskaram, Shruthi Akka.
Namaskaram.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. It means so much to us.
It's very nice that you're doing this. It's a really great project, and I'm just happy to be part of it.
Yeah, earlier we had your mom come and talk to us, Nirmala Auntie. So it was really nice to hear your experience. Now let's listen to the daughter's perspective. So can't wait to begin. So, Akka, how has it been for you, like COVID? How has COVID affected you musically? Uh, we know a lot of stuff about you, but tell us about how, like, COVID has affected you, what you've been doing in these past couple of, months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all musicians have had to become creative with their response to this and how they can, find new ways of working and find new avenues that they might not have explored. So I think in every project that I've done since the pandemic descended upon us, I've been fortunate to try something a little bit different or work with collaborators who propose something different. So my primary work these days, or at present, especially during the pandemic, is composing. Performing has a little more logistical challenges, which I can speak on in a moment. But composing is still feasible in the lockdown. It's obviously a little bit challenging if you can't be in the rehearsal room together, putting the pieces together, but we're able to convey things through meetings like this, and it's challenged all of us, I think, to do things a little bit differently. I've had some commissions for ensembles that are also distanced, like the people in the group are also not able to get together and play the piece. So really interesting then to find solutions and find ways of writing music where people can in fact record at home. And then for me, as my job, I feel like as a composer is often it's facilitating the community of people, like bringing them together if I'm writing for a group of people. So what are the ways we can make that happen when they're at home, and how can we still have a sense of community, which I think is important to all of us, even if you're not a musician, is finding new ways of having community. So that's been really, really special. Is I've done some things to facilitate that, but also the performers have come up with great ideas, and these organizers and these collaborators I have come up with really interesting ways where everyone can feel connected to each other. And at the end of it, we might have a recording that we might not have a live performance, but we have a recorded one, and that's very special that we can still make music in some ways. In terms of performing, I was meant to be doing quite a bit of performing in the last 6 months. Um, I was going to be in residency with a friend in a place in England where they were having us stay for a week to work together. So he comes from Chinese traditional music, and so I'd be bringing from the Carnatic tradition. So the two of us together were going to be collaborating, improvising, and creating together. So that's been postponed until we can work in person together. But we have tried improvising over Zoom, and it's been actually quite fun. And finding new ways of working around things like the latency and such has been a very interesting challenge. Um, this upcoming week, I was meant to be in New Jersey of recording a contemporary opera. So doing the other side of my performing life, which is Western classical music. So I was supposed to be reprising a role that I had sung a few years ago at a live concert. I was supposed to be doing that for a recording. They were going to record the whole opera. And so that's been, of course, postponed because of the health risks that poses with everyone in the room. But I'm hopeful for our future, and I think all of us have learned new ways of working. Certainly for the two of you, I imagine this vodcast came together probably because of these situations. Like maybe you'd been thinking about it for a while, but this maybe came into being because of the pandemic. Is that right?
Yeah, that is very true because technological advancements, especially Zoom, allowed us to stay in a meeting for this long and actually get good quality recordings. And we have to thank the people who are working in technology as well for making this stuff happen.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Proceed. You were gonna go next.
Oh wait, I was.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Time. Give some. Then let's begin.
Sure, you started. You started.
We'll start out fine. Okay. So Akka, let's talk about your Carnatic life initially. So obviously growing up with a mom that is a professional musician is quite like being lucky to have that kind of exposure. So tell us about your initial training with auntie and how you came to be with Carnatic music and then later on Western classical.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, indeed, I'm very, very fortunate. So as you said, my mother is Srimati Nirmala Rajasekar, but for me, that's Amma. And I suppose I had exposure to music, from the womb. They say Veena music in particular is very good for a babies and such. So definitely was very, very fortunate to have unfettered access to that, unlimited access to that. Um, so I was around it, growing up with it, surrounded by it, very fortunate. I started learning my first set of, verses that I can remember. I was doing this when I was 4 years old, and I had a few classmates as well, including my brother, actually my older brother. And so we learned together, and it was really, even then I realized, I guess I was very fortunate to have that channel that I could learn in my house and learn in this way. And I was also having to have, I happened to be learning alongside friends, so that was very special. What ended up happening was that for various reasons, the other students in the kind of group class I was in, they kind of took their own path with things. Maybe they went on to pursue a different kind of music, or they took a break from Carnatic music, something like that. So I was also the youngest one in that class. It was ages 4 to 9, and so I didn't actually have formal training for a few years. So it's not that I stopped learning, but I didn't. I wasn't really in a class at that in those few years.
Mhm.
And the thing about Amma that's really special, and I think has made a big impact on my decision to be a musician, is that she didn't ever um, force me to do it in any way, and she wasn't very strict about it in any way. In fact, looking back, I wish she had insisted that I, many parents encourage their kids to practice, and I wish that she'd done that as a parent for me, because then I would have probably practiced more and progressed and learned more, and I wish I'd had somebody maybe pushing me in that way. But for her, it was very important that I come to this on my own volition and that this be something that I find for myself. So she treated me like an adult when I was a kid. And so in those intervening years where I didn't really study, she just kind of, what she would do is she kept the door open for me. That if I ever wanted to be studying and wanted to learn it, I could come, but it was up to me to come. And I would always have the access, but it was up to me. So that, has made a huge impact, I think, on my decisions and my belief in pursuing music, because this is something that I've chosen to. It's not just something that was that I was required to do in any way. But definitely having that exposure and having the just living in that world, and when someone's doing the dishes and they're, practicing kalpana swarams, that's a really, really like beautiful thing to grow up with. And I'm very privileged, as you say. Both of you are students, and both of you are in musical households as well. So you can probably connect with that too. But definitely to the intensity with which she was having it, and having rehearsals in our household, and she was traveling for music, and I would go with her. I would go to these performances all around the country, all around the world. So fortunate. So when I resumed my studies formally, I actually sort of jumped into the Varnam class at that point because I had been listening and having that osmosis process for about 5 years between the ages of 4 and 9. And then 9 again, 8 or 9 is when I sort of resumed and my pursuit in a much more of a structured way. So I had this unstructured learning for some years. And I'd done enough basics that I was able to then go into Varnam. But actually, to this day, I don't necessarily know all the Geetams in the order that people have learned them. I've learned them just by listening. So that's a very interesting thing for me too, especially if I'm mentoring students at that stage. I have a different relationship with these pieces than a formally structured. Today we learn this Geetam, tomorrow we learn this. Same with some of my verses too. So I've had to kind of retroactively sometimes learn them after the fact. But then I went into Varnam class and sort of was in rigorous class and getting the chance to perform. As Sai Pranav, as you know firsthand, the Nadrasa performing ensemble, you get a lot of opportunities to sing in the community and to get the chance to experience what it is, the honor of being on stage is, before you do an Arangetram. So that's very, very crucial, I think, for students. And so that continued, and I got more serious about it and started practicing a little bit harder. And then I guess performed my first concert when I was let's see, now I would have been about 14, 13 or 14. And this is a short kacheri, not a full length. And then I did my Arangetram when I was 15, going to be 16, so around that age. So that's the progress that I'd had. But it was always very important to Amma as my guru that she remained my guru. So we are very, very close personally, and outside of class time, we're very close, and we have very much of a kind of best friend sort of relationship is how I see it. But I think it's important in the guru-sishya relationship that you maintain that respect for guru. And I would say that as a rebellious kid, I had trouble with that sometimes. I would talk back. I would have a smart mouth because I was used to joking around with my mother. She treated me as an equal outside of class. So that sometimes I would bring that attitude. But I think it's very important to respect the tradition that this comes from. And the idea is that guru is dispelling ignorance, bringing light to one's life, right? Guru is the one that carries the lamp into the darkness to show the path. So remembering that has been very, very important. And it's something I've learned to appreciate and come to respect much more as I've grown older. And also having exposure to a few other Vadyars as well. Like Amma is my main Vadyar, but I had the opportunity in 2014 to study with Amma's guru, who is Shri B. Sitarama Sharma, the late Shri B. Sitarama Sharma. So I studied with Sharma sir for a summer in India, and that was a very different experience. He was actually very, very nice to me, but I knew that he could be a strict teacher. I knew from Amma's stories, and I was kind of scared of him. Even though I really liked him as well and really respected him, I had that bayam, I had that fear, which I think I'd never really approached my lessons with that before, which was different probably for both of you. You've probably sometimes come with a little bit of fear or a little bit of apprehension. Fear is maybe the wrong word. Apprehension is probably the right word. Just being a little bit, just being a little bit more alert, perhaps, and trying to just soak in as much as you can from your gurus, and having that extreme respect is super important. And so I think as I grew older and grew to understand this tradition and this culture more, that understanding of that respect and understanding that when we are in class, that's a very particular place. And similarly, for that reason, Amma never said as a parent, I want her to be progressing in this way, where your parents might say for you that they want you to have a career that goes in XYZ's direction. She never did. She never could say that because she's my Vadya first and foremost in that particular relationship. So it's still interesting now to think, because now I'm sort of working in music and starting my career. But when we are in Carnatic music class, I have to very much think Guru Sishya, and I have that extreme respect. And then if we are collaborating and we're ever working alongside each other, it's a little bit of a different relationship.
Yeah, okay, definitely. And like, having that, having mom but and then having guru at the same time. So it's obviously there'll be battles, but then like that's just the whole fun. Like, having both at the same time is also a nice thing.
Very,
Yeah,
very lucky. Yes.
for sure. That balance is, and I can relate because that balance is really hard to have with the parent and also you being a kid, but also a student is a really hard balance. So you were actually, I think you read my mind. You stopped talking right when you were talking about your engagement. So can you give us more insight on your engagement, like details, um, nervousness, excitedness, any emotions you were feeling during practices or stuff like that, and accompanying artists and that as well.
Absolutely. So, as part of the fact that my mother was very careful to maintain guru, treating it as a guru and not putting pressure as a parent might, she was always very clear on that. She did not actually decide, as she does for her other students, that it was time for my Arangetram. She had received some people had, maybe I'd been singing for some other senior vidwans and that they had decided, and it finally came where Prasidh, your guru, Tanjavur Shri K. Murugubupati sir, who is also, I consider, a guru for me and guided me particularly in my Arangetram, but has since also helped me a lot with what I do. He came to Amma and he talked to Amma saying, do you think it's time for Shruti to do her Arangetram? And Amma said, yeah, I mean, maybe musically she might be ready, but why don't you talk to her and see if she's emotionally and strength-wise ready for that kind of process? And they came to me quite, he came to me quite seriously to say, this is not going to be an easy road to get to this stage. You're maybe showing the potential to be there, but there are many steps to take to this. And so it really really happened in this way where Amma was so careful with wanting to make sure that she's not pushing me and that she's respecting the tradition and the process that this comes from, and not tangling in the emotions that a mother might have, that it actually came from almost externally, the advice to do this. So that was, I think, around April that we started sort of intensively training, and I had my engagement from early September. So in some ways, I mean, some people like do a kind of a year-long process. So this wasn't like a very long time I had. I was a sophomore and I'm finishing my sophomore year, and then this was right before I started the Labor Day weekend before I started my junior year. So high school. So you both know what that means, school life.
Yeah, for sure.
I was, as you said, Prasid, as you made note of accompanying artists, I was most fortunate to have a just incredible group of accompanying artists. I had on Mridangam himself, Tanjavur Shri K. Murugubupati sir, and then, but in violin support for me was Shri Amasan Murtigaru, was very, very fortunate to have him. Had long been a fan of his music, so to have him as my accompanying violinist was a humongous honor and a little bit scary. And then also, as you know, I also had on Gatam, your father, Balaji uncle, and then I had Sriram uncle, Sriram Natrajan, Sriram Iyer, I should say, on Ganjira. So I had all of these vidwans. I was really, really fortunate. And then Kumari Priya Karajam played tambura for me, which was very special. That my sort of younger sister in music was on the stage with me was very very nice to have that support. So I was very, very fortunate. So in terms of the preparation process, like I said, we began in this very intensive way, and there was a lot of groundwork to be laid. And I think I thought I knew what I was getting into with this process. Like I'd said, I'd sung a few short concerts at this point, but it was very, very intensive training. And not necessarily just vocal, although, yeah, I had a lot of work I had to do vocally. Kind of an emotional strength, I think, too. I think I had been fortunate to have some gifts when I started music, probably from the early music exposure and such. And I think in some ways I coasted with those gifts until those points. And my practice habits were not at the rigor that they needed to be for this. And then also, sometimes when you can practice hours and hours, I would realize for the Edingitrum, but you weren't necessarily going to see the results that you needed from that. So the frustration of that and being okay with that and living with that idea of, yeah, I don't know how far I'm going to be able to take this, but just to keep going no matter what. The example that comes to me is I sang a piece in the ragam Ahiri called Mayamma. And this was a composition I learned for the Arangetram. It wasn't one I knew before. I had learned it, but I'd kind of learned some things a little bit incorrectly. So when I was sitting with my guru to work on this, and she had to correct quite a bit of the pidis and that were just not suited to the raga. So unlearning, as you both probably know, is a very, very tough process, and is also, yeah, one that makes you question. And in my case, I sort of having a sort of stubborn streak in myself, I got quite frustrated with this process of unlearning and actually said, I don't know if I want to do this piece in the Zen gym. It's just too hard, which is not the attitude you should approach it with it at all. So I made a bargain with myself. I said that I will do this piece. I will sing. So Amma has a rule that she kind of mentions. She's mentioned it as a bare minimum that Sai Pranav might be familiar with, which is that you should sing a piece 100 times before you sing it on stage, minimum, bare minimum. And sometimes she'll even say it in the sense of you should sing it 100 times before you can even say you know it. So I, being the sort of slightly stubborn, rebellious adolescent I suppose I was at that time, I said, this piece is so difficult for me, so frustrating. I will sing it 100 times, then show it to Amma and show her that I still can't do this. I'm not understanding it. I'm not getting it. So I will do that 100 times process just to prove a point. And then I actually pulled out a sheet of paper and made like tally marks on it. It was like completely counting. And it was about the 27th time, I know because I have those tally marks, that something started to change. And I started to just understand where this piece is coming from and the emotion expressed in it. And if you're not familiar with it, he is asking like, how why have you abandoned me? Or it's just completely, it's a state of vulnerability that few of us maybe experience in our spiritual life. We might experience that in other realms, but it started to make some sense, and I started to fall in love with the piece. And so by the time I got to my Arangetram, this was my favorite piece that I sang. And I sang a pallavi and other things and many things that were great fun and good challenges for me as well. And I loved the pallavi. It was composed by my guru's guru, Shri T.R. Subramaniam sir. So it was great, absolutely great pallavi as well. But and this song didn't have extensive manodharma or anything with it. It's not meant to be that kind of composition. But I came to understand something beyond those fireworks and understand a little bit, just get a glimpse of the essence of what is being said by Sri Shyama Shastri. So I think that I just got a glimpse of what is possible. So I would not say that in any way that I've reached a full understanding. I don't think so. But it certainly was something on a higher plane. And me in my sort of disgruntled adolescence, getting a glimpse of that was like seeing a little slice of divinity. So I found that transformative. And certainly, if nothing else, was absolutely a reason to believe that that perseverance does make a difference.
Yeah, that story was just clear, just sheer evidence to show that perseverance will lead you to great heights. So now, you were talking about high school years, and now, I know from class, so you were part of the Vijayadasami state choir or something close to that. I'm not sure of the exact choir, what its name is, but could you tell us a little bit about that and your Western go side about that?
Absolutely. So I, when I was in high school, I was in a school choir called the Vijayada High School Concert Choir, along with a smaller ensemble called the Chamber Singers. And then I did the Minnesota All-State Choirs, which is like the whole state gets together. My first year that I did the All-State Choir was actually the summer that I was training for my Arangetram. So I was selected for this choir after I had started the Arangetram training process. And it's basically, I spent 1 week near the middle end of August singing 7 hours a day of choral Western classical music.
Wow.
So when I was first selected, it was a huge honor, but I think we were all freaking out a little bit because it was just 2 weeks before my Arangetram. I was supposed to be deep, intensively in training in the Carnatic style, and I had to go do this week. I was very excited to go do this week, but a completely different thing and because I was singing so many hours a day in that, I wouldn't have time to practice Carnatic and keep my Arangetram going. So it was, definitely scary, the lead up to that. as you both are definitely aware, I'm sure, these are different styles of music and call for different techniques. Where they sit in the register for me are very distinct. So I'm sort of in the soprano register, which is the higher voice, the upper of the two traditionally considered quote unquote female voices. I'm in the higher one, a higher echelon, a higher category of voices. So that means that there's on one hand, I find that a little easier because there's less of an overlap in the swaras. Like I'm more in tarastai, ati tarastai, basically. But on the other hand, there are completely different techniques of production of sound. And as as the both of these have developed for me, that's something I've had to navigate. And wouldn't say it's been an easy ride. I had a Western teacher who, when I was very intensively studying opera when I was in college, I did a term where I just studied opera. I did a study abroad and did that. And I had people advise me saying that, if you want to get serious about this, you're going to have to choose one or the other. In that the thinking is that they kind of block each other, or that they somewhat prevent, they prevent each other from growing. And I would say that it hasn't been done very much, navigating both worlds, especially depends on the kind of voice you have too. And in the classical register, I have one that's it's got vibrato and these other things that we don't necessarily allow to come into your sound in Carnatic. In our school, we don't do kampite gamakams on sa or pa and things like that. So I have to be very, very clear to myself when I'm singing in which one I'm in. And sometimes I do sort of more experimental contemporary settings where I move between them. So then it's a completely different world in terms of the grammar, what are the rules of this. But it is something that I personally didn't believe that I would have to choose one or the other, so I chose to try to do both and keep both in my life. I think it means when I'm practicing and such, for example, I need to make separate time for each and also not over fatigue one or the other. And so constantly be thinking about technique. I think this is really important. I think it's absolutely possible to do both. But my voice has changed, and my Tadastai, for example, it naturally wants to go into a head-dominated sound with no chest resonance, which some in our world would call false voice. And so to navigate around that and to find things around that and not to go too far in the other direction and have a way to chest dominant sound, because in Carnatic music we have a mixed sound. We don't just it resonates the whole body. That's what is said in Shobilus Saptaswara. We talk about all of the different parts through which the sound comes, right? Nabi, Hrit, Kanta, Rasana. So finding these two worlds and being able to navigate them and be faithful to the rules of both has been something that's not easy, but something I believe in, because I couldn't imagine my life as one without the other. I have to have both. So that's how I view it. But yes, something I'm very much figuring out and continuing to discover.
Yeah, it's really amazing to hear this, right? Because, I mean, experiencing both this Western classical and Carnatic at the same time, and then just like coming together, it's really nice.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention another thing. Many high school students have talked about this same problem, but it's such a minimal skill for them. Whereas you are actually your profession collides with both your passion and your profession very much collide in that you love to practice. Your Carnatic music is like sort of a passion for you. You love to practice it and stuff, but then you come in Western music composing and everything, and finding the right notes and everything, it just clashes it all.
Yeah, definitely different rules. So for example, I mean, when I first was learning Western classical and the idea of modulating and changing keys, I was like, why would you change Shruti? Like you have a Shruti, stick with it, unless you're going to Madhyamam or something. And so finding different grammar and finding different rules. The thing I love about composing, and that's why I've moved a lot in this direction too, and so that I'm not only just singing but also composing. There are two things. One, I believe that we are all in the Carnatic world composers. We don't necessarily use that term or wield that term. The idea is that every performer is creating in different ways and having a different relationship with improvising and such. But I think that we could use that term more liberally in our field, composer. Even while we revere, the great composers of both say, of the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries, but also the ones of today, our modern legends that we have. I think we could work to dismantle the elitism that we put with composer only being some upper category, because I think we are all creating, and I don't think composer needs to be a word that's viewed as this distant thing. I think composer is creator. I don't think I see much of a difference there. But absolutely, the other thing about composing that I've personally been very important to me is that I can then find ideas of what my voice is, and not my literal voice, but who I am, not only being of these two musical traditions, but having grown up in these two worlds, like both of you, and to reflect the truth of that. Because for me, and I'm sure this is the case I know this is the case for both of you, my home culture is very important to me. My spiritual practice is important to me. These are all markers of who I am, and they've made a huge impact on me. But I'm also Shruthi, who is shaped by very different things, and I might be very, very different if I had grown up in India. I think my personality would probably be touched in a very different way if I think I've been very much shaped by the world that I'm in. Maybe that my core values would be the same no matter where I've grown up, but the environment around me, it's been very important for me to respond to that and react to that, and to think about the variety of friends I have and their worlds, and they're part of my community too. So I write music often because I think of it as a community building activity. When audiences come together to listen, when people work together to work on music, I think of that's all community. And we have a very strong community here, and consisting of aunties and uncles who are like extended family, and I feel very fortunate for that. And that's the gift of growing up in a diaspora. The word of being communities that have been moved from somewhere else and they create a very close-knit world, and there's a lot that we share and experience. But our community is also made up of people whose families are very different from ours, and who have a very different generational background. This is the truth of those of us who've born and raised here, or grew up here. And so I love that I can reflect those differences and bring those differences together, just as they exist in my real life, when I've got my close friends, non-Indian friends, are very fond of my family, and they know my mother very well, my parents very well, and they might sometimes even use the word auntie or uncle to describe them too. So these things are always blurring, and these worlds are constantly blurring, and I'm just in awe of the generation that's coming up now. I'm kind of cusp of millennial and Gen Z, so I don't know if I can claim Gen Z, but your generation, really, you just seem to be finding more and more solid footing in who you are. And it's not easy when you grow up being other, and we've all grown up in a state that we love, but one where we stick out when it comes to the majority of the population. But finding that footing and being very strongly connected to your heritage and reacting to the world around you. So I'm very, very, both of you, I'm very impressed by your connection to this home culture and this culture of your families and your ancestors, and also how you react and respond to the friends and other communities around you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is just to bring show Carnatic music and just bring it all together, and bringing in different elements, just like Western classical. So this is a really good platform for bringing that out.